in here, I'm going to be building a simple budget gaming PC using these parts right here. So we're not going to use any RGB, LED, none of that fancy stuff. We're just going to keep it light and simple. So I know it's been a pretty bad time to be building custom PCs due to the GPU shortages and all those miners, the bots, the scalpers, you know, and prices are always inflating as well. This build doesn't really need a graphics card because the client that I'm building this for won't really be playing any high demanding games. You know, they're just going to be using for like basic tasks like web browsing and all that. So this new processor, which is the Intel i5-11400, it does come with integrated graphics, so having a dedicated GPU won't really be a problem at all. PCPartPicker.com is the site that I use to select my components as well as compare prices. Let's go with the parts that we'll be using today. This is the i5-11400 at 6 cores, 12 threads with a base clock of 2.6. B560M ORS Pro. Team Group T4's Vulkan Z, 16 GB of DDR4 3200 MHz. Team Group M.2 SSD, 256 gigs, 600 watt 80 plus bronze semi-modular. The Montech Flyer Micro ATX. Let's start by opening up the motherboard box. That is the Wi-Fi antenna. That is the SATA cable, but we won't be needing that. That is the M.2 heatsink screw. And it does come with two M.2 screws for your M.2 SSD. Let's start first by working with the motherboard. Bunch of USBs, HDMI, DisplayPort, and Wi-Fi. Motherboard is placed on top of the box. I will now be unboxing the processor itself. It does come with a stock heatsink cooler with pre-applied thermal paste. I'll open up the lever on the CPU socket of the motherboard. And so here you want to match that triangle on the bottom of the processor with the triangle on the bottom of that motherboard on the corner. And you want to drop the processor down into the socket nice and gently, just like that. Pull this lever down, and as you can see, that plate does come off when you're using an Intel motherboard. Pull that lever down, put it right under there. Now we'll be installing the heatsink stock cooler onto the motherboard, and I did forget to record the part of me actually installing the cooler, so I apologize. So this part's pretty straightforward. I used a flathead screwdriver to tighten the corners of my stock cooler, and you can also use your hands as well, so it's up to you, whichever you want. Oh yeah, don't forget to do crisscross pattern. We're going to plug in the CPU fan from the heatsink to the motherboard. It's labeled CPU fan on most motherboards, so you want to put the heatsink fan plugged into that. We're going to be installing the RAM. So you want to open the slots 2 and 4 so we can apply dual channel memory. And once you press down, you'll hear a clicking sound, which means it's locked in. And don't forget to check back on your motherboard manual. You know, you don't want to throw that away because there's some valuable information there, and I know people would always frown about looking through those. We will be installing the M.2 SSD onto the motherboard. We got the M.2 screw. We're going to push right into that slot, and we're going to push the M.2 SSD down with the M.2 screw that we have right here, and we are going to tighten it up. Install the M.2 on the bottom rather than the top because it didn't fit. That's what she said. So there are motherboard holes on the PC case chassis already applied. And what you want to do is you want to use those to match with the holes on the motherboard itself, as you can see what I'm doing right here. And if you're not sure if they are aligned, you'll know once the IO shield right here in the back is matched. These are the motherboard standoff screws that come from your computer case, so you'll be using these to screw in all the holes in the motherboard, which there are about 8 or 9, and I do recommend you use a magnetic tip screwdriver for this one because it's really difficult if you're not having one. So now I'm going to be installing the rear exhaust fan from the case. It's labeled as system fan right next to the 8-pin connector. This is the bottom intake fan in front of the case. I will be plugging into the fan header on the motherboard. And I did label it on the CPU off, but I switched it up later on as I saw there's another system fan right below it. This one is the intake fan at the top, which is in the front of the case as well. I plugged it into the fan header on the motherboard labeled system fan 2. It's right next to the 24-pin connector of the motherboard, so it's really easy to not miss that one. So far so good. Now we will be installing the power supply into the case. Unboxing the power supply. So there's a bunch of cables here that we won't be needing. So we're only going to use mainly the 24 pin and the 8 pin connector. EVGA. So when you're installing the power supply into the case, you want to face the fan of the power supply down and not up. And you're going to match it with the square holes right here of the case with those 4 holes that you'll be using to screw it in. These are the 4 screws that come from your power supply box. So you're going to be using that in to screw in the 4 holes from the case and the power supply together. And while you're doing this, you want to have one arm holding the power supply and pushing it towards you while you're using your other arm to screw in the 4 holes as well, so you can apply pressure. And you want to do this in a crisscross pattern as well. I'll be routing the cable for the 8 pin connector of the CPU. It is going on the top corner right here of the case. And I will also be routing the cable for the 24 pin connector of the motherboard. It'll go on the hole on the left top side right here. Install the 24 pin connector on the right side. It's right next to the RAM slots. The 8 pin connector for the CPU is always on the top left corner of the motherboard. This is the USB 3.0, which is part of the front panel connectors of the case. It does go in one way only, so you gotta pay attention to the pins. So it goes on the USB 3.2 of the motherboard. These are the USB and HD audio of the front panel connectors of the case. So I'm gonna be routing them both separately as what I'm doing right here, but it may be different for you if you're using a different case. It'll vary. So the HD audio is gonna be plugged into the audio port of the motherboard. And it also goes one way only, so you have to pay attention on the pins of the motherboard. The USB plugs into the USB port of the motherboard. There's actually 2 in here, but it really doesn't matter which one you use. So I ended up using the right side. I recommend you pause this part of the video and also look back to your motherboard manual as well, depending on what board you use. So yeah, this is the hard drive LED. There is a plus and minus sign, and when you plug those pins into the motherboard, you really gotta be careful on which way you do it. But unfortunately, I did not really show a good demonstration while I was filming this because of how difficult and small it was while trying to push it into the motherboard, and it was tiny. That's what she said. Now everything has been plugged in and cable managed. It is time to close up with the panels of the case and boot it up. When you boot up your computer for the first time, it will probably boot up into the BIOS display of your motherboard, or depending on what board you chose, that looks similar like this. And it will also probably display texts of no boot device available, which means there's no operating system detected. And I will show you how to install Windows 10. First, you'll need a USB flash drive of at least 8 GB or more. Next, plug the USB onto an existing computer that has Windows 10 installed on it. Go on Google, type Windows Media Creation Tool, and it's the first link. So the webpage will look like this. You want to scroll down and click Download Tool Now, and on the bottom left corner, you want to click that file. So this is the license terms. You want to click on Agree. And we're going to click on Create Installation Media because we have a USB drive. And we are going to click on USB flash drive as well, and whatever it says on your USB flash drive, that will be the one that will install the Windows. Now the Windows 10 is going to be downloading onto the USB flash drive, so you're gonna have to wait for a little bit. And once it's done, click on finish. And now right here, you want to go in the bottom right corner and eject the USB flash drive just so that you don't forget. Alright, so now I'll be transferring this USB drive onto the new computer that I just built. And when I boot up, this is what the screen will show. So click next and install now. It'll show you this part where it says activate Windows. So we don't have a product key, so I'm going to click on I don't have a product key. And for this one, I'm going to be using Windows 10 Pro. Click on agree for license terms. So this one you want to click on custom install, and I have one drive, so that's where I'll be installing Windows, and on this part you're gonna have to wait for a bit. Windows 10 has been installed on the new computer and it will now be rebooting up. The screen will now look like this. This is where you're going to be setting up for your Windows 10. I'm going to click US. I'm going to click on US again. So everything's pretty self-explanatory. This is a second keyboard layout. I'm just going to skip that for now. And right here, I don't have internet installed on this, so I'm going to just put I don't have internet. I'll be doing that later on. And here I'm just going to continue with limited setup. So this part right here is pretty self-explanatory as well, so you can do this part on your own. And these are the privacy settings for your devices on Windows 10, and I'll just fix that all later. And this is Cortana, I'm just going to skip that. It is now getting ready to log you in onto Windows 10. So we are reaching the final end right here. And here we are, we got Windows 10 logged in. So here we can go update your drivers, tune in your settings, and I will show you how to activate Windows on this part, so stay tuned. Go to update and security on settings, click on activation, and right here it says that Windows is not activated. And on the bottom where it says change product key, this is where you would normally put in the activation key. So I will be showing you a couple of sites where you can get keys. So this is on bestbuy.com. There's Windows 10 Pro right here where you can just get the activation key. And right here, this is URCD key. These are the gray market keys, which are much more cheaper, as you can see right here, which is $20 for the OEM key. It shows right here how to activate Windows if you're not sure. So it'll give you instructions on this part, which is good if you're having trouble. So this is another site, gvgmall.com, and it's another way to get cheap Windows 10 keys as well. So right here it's about $20 too. There is another way to get Windows 10. So go on update and security, activation on settings, go to the store of the Microsoft, and this is a more genuine version of Windows 10, but it's much more expensive. So alright, so that will be a wrap. I didn't want to make this demonstration too short, but long enough, and hopefully it wasn't too hard for you. That's what she said. Thanks for watching till the end. Please drop a like if you enjoyed and found this to be convenient. Comment below if you have questions or thoughts. I will put out more related videos very soon. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you on the next one.